Welcome to the Choir Conductor podcast. Each episode features a conversation with people in the choir or music education profession. I am your host, Zach Thompson. Let's start the show. My guest today is John Anderson. John is a music professor at Polk State College in Winter Haven, Florida. John grew up in Bartow, Florida. He earned his bachelor's degree in music education from Florida Southern College and a master's degree from the University of South Florida. He spent 28 years teaching for the Polk County Public Schools prior to joining Polk State College in 2005. During his career, he has led student performances at Carnegie Hall in New York City and conducted singers for Disney World. John, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so we are just concluded the choral panorama, and now we're transitioning to the FEA meeting here in Orlando, and you've been nice enough to kind of sit down with me and talk for a little bit. So let's start with you telling the listeners about your musical upbringing.
It started out literally as a child. My parents were both amateur musicians. My dad and mom even dated by leading the music for small churches out in the rural part of Polk County, and so I grew up in church music, and we had a very active children's music program at the Baptist church where I grew up and continued all through that. And I even at that time, my mother played the piano, and they saw to it that I had piano lessons. And my father played some. He didn't have the advantage of having a lot of training. However, he grew up in the Appalachian part of northern part of Georgia, and learned to sight sing better than I do from the old singing schools that they had up in the mountains. And he had gotten very adept at that. However, they used the shaped note hymnals that you don't see much of anymore. But he was an excellent sight reader and a very good singer. And so music just was second language in our house. And everybody always got together and sang at home and played the piano and sang together. And so I just knew from the beginning, really, that that's what I wanted to do, and had very fine teachers in high school. I was very fortunate. In fact, one of the great gentlemen that is still with us today in the Florida Vocal Association, Ron Corbin, was my high school choral director. In fact, it was his first job, and he was fresh out of interning, and he came to Bartow High School, and he was amazing. It just stood the whole place on their ear, and he was with us for a while, and I went on to college at Florida Southern, and pursued a music degree, since I was involved with music, I really like to play pipe organ too, and so I became the campus organist, and that kind of supplemented me getting through college, but I always wanted to be a conductor. That was choral conducting really was my thing, and so managed to get through there and went on to teach in Polk County schools, and I've been there pretty much ever since, except for a short period where I went into full-time ministry and music ministry at First Baptist Church in Bartow, and then just as suddenly kind of ended up going back into schools and ended up at Polk State College, and that has been a delight. It's been exciting years because we started with a very, very tiny program. And I was actually, my first year there, I was teaching choir, vocal jazz ensemble, band, all 4 music theories and all 4 ear trainings, and
Wow.
private lessons.
Everything.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
But we didn't have very many students at that time, so I could get away with it. But I told them, you have got to fix this, you know. And fortunately, we had a new president that came in just after the first year, and so, you know, and she was a fireball, and the whole college changed. We went from 2 campuses to 5 campuses. We had, you know, the whole college just grew enormously, and she threw everything into getting the arts program going. And so now we have, right now my schedule is I have a concert choir, the vocal jazz ensemble that I had to start off with, and a men's chorus. And then we have another professor that does a women's chorus. And so we went from 15 kids roughly that were music majors to it changes of course every semester, but we run 60 to 70 music majors.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, and like I say, it fluctuates year to year.
Mm-hmm.
You're never sure, but we have a very, very high success rate of students that go from us to the major universities and whatnot that they audition for, and so we're really proud of that. You know, they go out prepared, and we've got some that are doing real well. And the neat thing is, here at this conference, there's a bunch of our folks that were our kids. You know,
yeah.
It's great to go back and see all these successful young musicians going on. You know, so.
Sure. And can you talk a little bit about the transition from teaching high school to then having a university position?
It's very different. First of all, if you've been teaching high school for a while, it is unbelievably less restrictive. I mean, you have so much more ability, you know, to do things. Because I remember high school days, you know, sitting through the faculty meetings, and it was you'll do this, you'll do this, state mandate. There are no mandates at college level. You can do anything you want to, as long as it's getting the job done. They don't care. And in fact, I was so steeped in teaching high schools, you know, and stuff. I went in to meet the president, you know, and she came, and I said, you know, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to do this, and I was explaining all this stuff, and she says, it sounds really nice. She says, I have not a clue what you're talking about, but she says, you're the authority on this. If you think that's what we should do it. And I'm like, okay, you know,
yeah.
And away we went. You know, I had never heard those words before, you know,
right.
But at least coming from administrators, you know. But and I was lucky, really, when I was teaching high school. I had some of the greatest principals. I mean, they really were super people and supported the program, and so consequently, you know, our students did well when they see support. You know, they respond to that. But you know, it was a really wonderful experience, but doing all that. But college is really fun. It will drive you crazy because your schedule is so weird.
Yeah.
You know, like our classes meet every other day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we don't do after school rehearsals. Our philosophy is, if we can't do it in rehearsal, we're not doing it. And you know, and it's so funny to watch the kids that have been in good high school programs, and they're like, so when do we eat at night? Well, we don't. You know.
Yeah.
Well, when do we do this? In class or before class, when you practice on your own. You practice.
What's that?
Yeah. But that's what we teach. And and it pays off. So we get to do some really nice literature. And some of the things that I never thought I'd get to do in high school, I've gotten to do. And doing some major works and things like that. That's fun to do. But and something that a lot of people don't know: the state colleges actually have a thing kind of like Allstate.
Okay.
It's the Winter Music Symposium, and they go from different universities every 2 years, and it's a 4-day event, and there's no audition. The people that we have are the ones that are studying music, and they're pretty serious about this, and so we take a number of our better students and go to that every year in January. And so that, and the nice thing is our particular college foots the bill for the whole thing.
Nice. Hotel
Rooms, the whole 9 yards, and transportation. So we take about 40 every year from our program, and it's the same kind of deal that they have, except they have more than just big choirs and big bands and stuff like that. They have the choirs, the bands, but they also have strings, and they also have guitar ensembles and all that kind of stuff, and just some wonderful possibilities of things for them to do, and so they have a good experience. So the state colleges are really trying to kind of get there, if we can get the legislature to help out.
Sure.
With that, but it's a really interesting experience, and the nice thing is you don't have the extreme pressure that high school and middle school teaching, it just that drive that goes on. And as I'm getting older, I'm kind of appreciating the fact that you don't have that. You have your other things that bug you, because you have to juggle that schedule so strangely, when you've got it every other day, and the holiday pops up, and oh gosh, I just missed a half a week of rehearsals, and our semesters are shorter,
right,
too, and so you got to get it done, and get it done fast. And the other thing is, in high school, you pretty much know who you're going to have in class.
Mm-hmm.
Every semester, I can have a completely different group. And depending on how fast they register, it can make your blood pressure go up real fast.
Yeah.
Because, like, for instance, right now, if I was to pull up my roster, I would probably have, at last count, I think I had 7 people in concert choir. There's going to be more than that.
Mm-hmm.
But my first year, I thought I was going to have a heart attack when I saw that. I'm like, there's nobody there.
Yeah.
And my wife's like, calm down, they'll show up. And they did. But they waited to the last minute, and they still wait to the last minute.
Yeah.
And for people that have high school students that are getting ready to go into college, tell them to, once they decide on where they're going and they have made application and they're accepted, go ahead and get all the stuff done ahead of time early.
Yeah.
The minute they open registration, go and register, because so many just don't know to do that. And they wait till the last minute, and it gives us heart attacks, but it really makes it hard for them. And that's something that really that affects us a lot, because it affects personnel too.
Yeah.
And our college has started doing this thing that if a class doesn't make by a certain point, it goes away.
Oh wow.
And a lot of the adjunct professors, it's bad for them, because what they had thought they were going to have goes.
Right.
And that's a very scary thing. So
yeah, But yeah, especially if that's like one of your few classes that you are teaching. Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, it's a little tenuous, but those of us that are on continuing contract, it's not so bad. But still, it still makes your heart kind of flutter a little bit when you see that. But I've really enjoyed it. It's just super, and I still work in churches and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds very freeing.
It is.
I mean, I guess it sounds freeing if you know what you're doing and you have a plan.
Yeah.
If you are a little bit unsure about what you're doing and you're not sure and you don't have a long-term plan, I could see how that would be a little bit.
I will admit it will blow right up in your face.
Yeah.
I've seen that personally. But, there was a couple of times, particularly when I was first starting, I thought, oh, man, I'd really love to do this piece. This is great. And then you see the group that you've got, and if you don't have a soprano that can hit a high B flat real clearly, don't do that piece.
Yeah, right.
But I've got a whole shelf of these are one of the ones I'm going to do one of these days. But there's so much good literature out there anymore, and it's just so much fun because you don't have this heavy structure of high school that you have to do this and do it here, and you can't do anything like that because it might cause some questions. You can do any kind of literature you want, and I've been guilty of doing some really unusual things all at once. That's the really fun part because you can do concerts that go from the greats with Bach and all of that stuff, and turn around and do something like I Want a Hippopotamus for Christmas. Which unfortunately gets a bigger response from the crowd.
Yeah, they love it. I've done that song. Yeah,
it goes over well. And if you add the kazoos, it's wonderful.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So you're talking about that you have like all this list of pieces that you would love to do. Do you have a favorite musical experience either as an audience member or as a performer?
Oh, goodness. I think possibly singing the Duraflé Requiem with Robert Shaw conducting with the Master Chorale of Tampa Bay was one of the greatest experiences. My graduate recital was for my master's degree was exciting because my degree's in conducting, and so you have to have a choir and an orchestra to conduct. We're still paying for that, but it's just to do a higher level piece of music with an orchestra for the first time, really, on my own, was a thrilling experience. But and I have to say, I had one long-term, really wonderful experience. I was literally teaching a voice lesson one day, and my phone rang, and it was the producer of the Candlelight show at Disney, and I had groups there consistently for a number of years, and he called in and he said, I was wondering if you would be willing to conduct the cast choir for Candlelight, and I'm like, I really should think about it. Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, and I did that for 10 years, and the first time I don't know how long if you've been dealing with Candlelight, but back in the first days when they opened it, in fact, that was another experience too. I got to be in the Disney opening day ceremony,
Yeah.
I was in high school, and we sang in a 1,000-voice choir on the front of the castle, because that was all that was there, was just Magic Kingdom.
Uh-huh.
And you know, in fact, I'm actually in the Time magazine photo,
Nice.
you know, from the first day. I'm like the fourth spot over here,
Uh-huh.
a little dot up there. But at any rate, when we did it originally, they would only do it for 2 nights, and it was a 1,000-voice choir on the back of the train station in Magic Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Epcot opened, this one particular year, they decided that they were going to move it because it was such a big deal. They moved it to Epcot, and the producer came to me that night and he says, we're thinking about moving this over to Epcot. And I said, well, that's going to be different because the stage is much smaller. He says, yeah. And he says, we're probably going to do it a little bit more. I said, well, what do you mean a little bit more? He says, well, we're going to do 3 shows a night, and we're going to do it for 33 days. And I'm like, you're kidding. You know?
You went from 2 to 100 shows?
And the thing is, all those cast choir members are volunteers, and they do it just because they love it. And it was very competitive to get in, and they said, you know, we're going to have a 90-voice choir. It has to be balanced just right with voicing, and you know, we got to have that for every show. Well, first off, we discovered it is physically almost impossible, unless you are a very experienced pro singer, to do 3 shows back to back. You know, and with all that music, and a lot of these people are older, you know, and they're all volunteers still, you know. And so they said, okay, we've got to do something. So, and they could not, since they're volunteers, they could not use them on anything except their day off. They couldn't pull them out of work. So, well, obviously we had to expand to fill every performance. So I ended up rehearsing 1,250 people twice a week, starting in July.
Wow.
And we rehearsed in places like one of the old restaurants that had been kind of, you know, shut down for a while. And they built a little podium, brought in a keyboard, and they filled the restaurant and put me on this platform up there, gave a downbeat, and away we went, you know,
Wow.
with people everywhere. I have never had more serious singers. I mean, they were just, you know, intense. But it was just a thrill. I mean, to give a downbeat and that many voices come at you,
Yeah.
and they meant it was going to be right. you
Yeah,
know.
and it's big music too. It's not like an
Yeah.
easy thing. Yeah.
Shout for joy.
Yeah. With
Quite a
1,000
shout.
people. Wow.
And there were people with backgrounds. I mean, that they were pro singers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them, and so you could get anything you wanted to out of them. But just wonderful people, and they were just so into it, you know, and anything they could do to make it better, they were willing to do it. You didn't have to argue with anybody about anything. They were just set to go, you know. But that was a thrill, and you know, it's been fun to see that show has gone on and still lives and breathes, you know. Got to meet some nice people too, you know.
Yeah.
Spending the day with James Earl Jones wasn't a bad thing.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was my first day.
Wow. Yeah, and the candlelight, it's a huge deal to all my students in choir. Like,
Yeah.
It's a big recruiting tool.
Oh yeah,
and
it's
it's a really wonderful thing. You mentioned you got to work with Robert Shaw. What was that experience like?
I was in grad school at USF, and they had Mr. Shaw come in. It was one of his last performances, really. He didn't live much longer after that. But I mean, our professor at the time, Dr. Robert Summer, had been very, very close friends with him for many years. They both went to school together, and they were always, working together. And so when he came, all of us that were in the grad school class were just like,
yeah.
And he had been known to be very, very tough on other choirs, and Dr. Summer had prepared us. I mean, he was, he was coming,
Mm-hmm.
so, and he really had us prepared, and I think that was probably the best that the Master Chorale ever sang. We did the Dorfley Requiem, and the Beethoven Mount of Olives, I think, but and with the Florida Orchestra and the whole 9 yards. It was exquisite, and we did like 3 performances of it, and it was just so wonderful to work with him. But and he was, you hear about people that were musical geniuses. That mind was amazing, because he did all of the rehearsals and all the performances totally from memory.
Wow.
And in rehearsal, he would do things like he stopped the rehearsal one day, and you could see him kind of mentally paging through the score.
Yeah.
And he's like, English horn, measure 39. That is a misprint in your score. It should be a B flat instead of a G or something like that. And the guy looked down there and says, "Oh yeah, it's wrong."
Wow.
And we're all like, "Okay, that's just not normal."
Yeah.
But we had some good times with that, and so many of my dearest friends from that time. We're getting to the point. A lot of my dearest friends are retiring,
Mm-hmm.
and I could technically relatively soon, but I'm kind of like, I'm going to keep going as long as it's still fun.
Right.
And right now it's still fun.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of either singing or conducting. You can do it almost your entire life.
You can, and the more you do it, the more exciting it is, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's that energy. I still love it when the newbies come in, and all of a sudden you see that light come on,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just really touching. It is and to find these kids that don't even know they can sing. I have one right now that is just this wonderful guy. I mean, he's a giant, and he walked in. I thought, man, I hope he has a good voice, because he's really built for it. Most magnificent bass voice I have ever heard come out of a human. Super nice kid. He asked me in a voice lesson the other day. He says, "You really think I sing all right?" And I'm like, "Yeah,
Yes.
you do.
Yeah.
You have a career here." But they don't know, and to introduce really great literature to people. We have such a wonderful job, and right, like where we're at right now with the Florida Vocal Association. I have friends that are in other businesses or other areas of education and things like that, and they're like, "What is it with you music people? You all want to go to these things, and we have to go to these there. And I made the mistake of going to an education conference. That's the most frightening thing I've ever seen. If it hadn't been that the college sent me, I would have asked for my money back. I mean, or their money back because they paid for it. But to sit in a room and look at a spreadsheet on a screen in a theater with 2,000 people and hear this person drone on that had a voice that never modulated above that. It was death. And fortunately, I was with one of the other folks from the college and she's an extremely good English teacher, and I leaned over and I said, if he was doing this in your class as a demonstration, what would you have graded him? She says, I graded him, gave him an F when he walked out and said, good morning. And that was about it.
Yeah.
But, they said, you guys have fun and you like each other and you help. I mean, first thing that everybody does when have you seen that new piece?
Right. Yeah.
That's how we greet each other anymore. And that's the wonderful thing about musicians. We do help each other. When I did my graduate recital, I had 4 or 5 of my classmates sing with me, because they were nice enough to do that. And that's what we do.
Yeah.
And if you do this for a while, it's really touching when I get stopped in Walmart and, Mr. Anderson, I haven't seen you in forever. Remember when we sang it? And and I've got some that have done pretty well. In fact, it's really kind of neat when I sit down in here and there's 8 or 10 of my students that are now choral directors, different places, and in fact, one of the kids I taught in high school is the bass player for Mercy Me, the Christian group.
Okay.
He was in the original group.
No
Still playing with them.
Yeah.
And he was quite a character, but good guy, But they're out there. They're doing well, and that makes me happy.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and I'll ask you just a couple quick more questions and then we'll kind of wrap things up. What advice would you give your younger self?
Practice more. Practice a lot more. And always do what makes you happy. There's times that I have begrudgingly done some things that I'm like, why did I do that? For me, it's been a God thing. I mean, from the very beginning, and find that person that's special for you, because my wife and I have been married now for 38 years. And,
congratulations.
Yeah, and we've been through a lot. I lost my mom. Now she's lost her mom. Her dad's 90-something in a nursing home. And we've raised a son, and he's becoming, his own man here, and but we've really, honestly, some of our very, very best friends and our very, very best memories are like we're doing right now, sitting at the Florida Vocal Association stuff. I've been a member forever and ever and ever, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just I think the most wonderful calling, and I just think it's exactly what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
I'm not the greatest musician in the world, but I've gotten to be around some of the greatest people ever, and I intend to do that as long as I can breathe.
Yeah, that sounds good. Do you have a favorite app, like on your phone?
Let's see. I'm thinking of. I have several that I like. I use YouTube a lot because there's more and more really good choral things on there.
It's amazing what's on there.
Yeah, and you know, some of the new groups, you know, that are out, like Voctive and ones like that.
They're great.
You know, yeah.
My students love them.
Yeah, I know so many of them because I've known some of them since they were little kids.
Uh-huh.
You know? That's the part of getting old is weird because all these people are running around going, "I remember you when you were like this tall."
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But there's, yeah, that I think YouTube and any of the music. There's a new one out, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's an ear training thing that is really unusual. But I'm finding out it really works well.
Okay.
I'll have to dig that up.
Yeah.
I'll pass that along to you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Do you have a favorite book? It can be any kind of book.
Yeah. Well, the Bible's my favorite one, but I love, believe it or not, Robert Shaw's book, Dear People.
Okay.
It's a collection of his letters that he had written to his choirs over the years. And there's some fascinating stuff in there. And there's one, apparently rehearsal did not go well because he typed, this is in the days of typing, he typed it in the shape of a dagger.
Yeah.
But there's great works out there, you know. I like comedy things too. I'm always just stumbling onto interesting I like little tidbits of stuff about musicians and
Sure.
crazy things that went on.
Yeah. So you're the second guest to say the Bible and the second guest to say Dear People.
Really?
Yeah. So I've read Robert Shaw Reader, so it has some of the aspects of that, but I want to read Dear People. But so those of you that are listening, if you go to zachthomsonmusic.weebly.com/016 for episode 16, I'm going to have all the links to all the books and the other stuff we're mentioning on my website. And then if you use that link and purchase it through Amazon, we'll get a small kickback, but it won't charge you anything extra. So that'll help us to bring the show. So look for that in the website. Other than music, do you have any hobbies?
I fiddle with the computer some. Between teaching and doing music, there's not a lot of time for much of anything else.
It's hard.
Except family, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm a Disneyphile. In fact, my wife, she has grown to just love Disney cruises. So we're going to be doing, I think, our 11th one in the near future.
Nice.
But she's always planning that. So I keep telling her I'm working for Disney actually right now because
Right. Yeah.
it's all going to these cruises.
Yeah. My wife really loves Disney, and so she's excited when we have these conferences in Orlando.
Oh yeah.
Because she just takes my daughter to Disney all day.
Oh yeah.
And it's much nicer because we live, an hour and a half from Disney. Here, that's like a half hour. So it's nice.
Yeah.
That's great. And kind of the last question. Can you talk about your programming for your choirs for the upcoming season, if you have it already? If you don't.
This is the terrifying part of teaching college.
Yeah.
Because you do not know what will walk through your door.
That's true.
And I won't know that for another 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of like, you know. And
but then maybe you could talk about what you did in the spring.
Oh, okay. Well, spring was different. We were having a situation. Our college president, who has been just magnificent, retired, and we were all just like, ugh. So we had a final concert for her. So everything was kind of geared toward, thank you for everything you've done, but. She's quite a character. We love Dr. Holden to death, and she was one of those people. First of all, she has a memory like Sheldon Cooper on Big Bang. She knew every one of us, everybody on faculty, everybody on staff, everybody down to facilities, everything by name. She knew my office phone number. She knew my office number and what I did before I ever met her, before she ever was on the job.
Wow.
She had memorized everybody. And she memorized the students. Because, you know how it goes. I'm sure your principal does the same kind of thing. If they're going to have some kind of meeting at the school, they'll have us come over and do some little performance thing, or play background music. I've played enough background music for nurses' pinnings and everything else, and they have us come in and help. Well, my best groups, pretty soon she knew exactly who they were, and she would do things like if she heard that one of them was having an audition someplace, she would send them a personal note to encourage them. You can't buy that.
That's amazing.
And she knew them all by name, and everything, which freaked them out. The first time you've met her maybe once and she walks past you and calls you by name, that will freak you.
Yeah.
And so she was retiring, and so all my colleagues and I are like, what can we do? What can we do? And so we did this whole concert we did a little heavy stuff, and then we did some silly things. In fact, I had my men's group sing Lydia the Tattooed Lady, which really went over. Actually, I think the audience reacted that the best anything we did. But the big deal was at the end we had her come up and conduct the alma mater.
Cool. Scared
her to death. We had to do one of the other professors that I ended up having to do conducting lessons with. She insisted we had to rehearse her on that because she says, I don't want to make a fool of myself doing it. Well, she did. She got such a big deal out of it. For her last act at graduation, she conducted it again at graduation. So it went over. But I love Z. Randall Stroop. I think anything the man writes, and I've heard some really beautiful stuff here that is getting ready to get used. Mm-hmm. So that's the wonderful thing. There's so much good stuff out there.
Yeah.
And Head's bringing in the people that they do every year. I mean, you just can't beat that. And you can't find it anyplace else.
Right.
Because I've talked to some friends, that live, in different states, and they're like, well, we have to pay all this money to come to that, and you have it for free?
Yeah.
That's just unheard of.
Florida is a great place for choral music.
It is, and a lot of it is due to the heads.
Yeah.
And because I started, I will honestly say, I opened my account with Bill and Shirley Head in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
It was my first day at college at Florida Southern.
Wow.
And they were there for a conference, and they asked me to just kind of be there, as a representative for the college. And so I struck up a conversation with them, and the rest is history. I mean, I've been their customer forever.
Yeah.
And don't intend to change.
Sure. Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for talking with me and taking time out of the conference to have this conversation. Yeah. Where's the best place for people to get in contact with you?
Well, the college is really easy to get a hold of me. My email is very simple. It's just janderson at polk.edu, and you can reach me there. And also, if you call my office number, which is 863-292-3606, you'll probably get a voicemail. A voice message. If you leave a message on my phone, it automatically records that and emails it to me wherever I am. So you can get to me very quickly that way.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much, John.
Sure. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Choir Conductor podcast. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave a review. Go to zackthompsonmusic.weebly.com for show notes, an archive of podcast episodes, and free compositions. Have a great week.